Have you ever been a fan of a series or a specific game and just thought, man, I just can't wait for that to be remade or remastered? I mean, the original was already so amazing and well done, just think about how it would look on modern consoles. Okay, now what if the opposite happened? Before we dive into the demakes for Persona 4 and 5, we're going to need to know what a demake actually is. Instead of remaking the game with updated visuals, gameplay mechanics, and sometimes the story for newer, more powerful consoles, the game is reimagined to fit the limitations of an older or more hardware inferior system. This usually means things like visuals, mechanics, and the story as a whole could be chopped down to their core elements in order to fit on an older console. Some examples would include Super Mario Galaxy on the DS, or Super Mario Sunshine for the Nintendo 64. Which I'll probably make a video on, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon to get notified when that comes out. Am I doing this YouTube thing right? Today, we'll be going over the demakes for Persona 4 and Persona 5, which were originally designed for modern consoles, with Persona 4 being ported to all of them, and how two solo developers managed to fit these massive JRPGs onto the Nintendo Game Boy. You know, that classic gray brick from 1989 that could survive a bombing. Now, the Persona series overall is known for its well-polished visuals and dynamic character designs, with the most recent entries really hammering that point in. Games like Persona 5 Royal and Persona 3 Reload have these really breathtaking and cinematic cutscenes that almost makes you forget that you're playing a video game. That, combined with a star-studded cast of characters, and you have yourself a recipe for an amazing story. The demakes for P4 and P5, on the other hand, are just a tad bit more limited, mainly due to the fact that the Game Boy is at a whopping negative 7,000% disadvantage in processing power when compared to modern consoles. Yet, even at such a disadvantage, the little guy could still theoretically render actual cutscenes from the games. That takes a lot of character. And speaking of characters, the art for each of them has been turned into much more pixelated sprite designs in order to fit within the limitations of the original GB. And I can't help but think of Zack from Oniplays when I look at Margaret's. While the Game Boy's technical limitations means less detail, it also gives these demakes a unique charm. It's truly impressive and interesting to see these games condensed down to their core elements, simplified down enough so it can theoretically actually run on a Game Boy and with just enough detail for players to get the gist of what they're looking at compared to the originals. World exploration has always been a major gameplay mechanic in the Persona series. Having to balance a normal social life while also fighting the shadows of society is pretty much the bread and butter of this series. In the original Persona 4, you're able to travel around the small and rural town of Inaba. You can hang out with your friends at the local superstore, go shopping for some new weapons in order to slay the shadows in the TV world, or just spend a day relaxing and fishing. In the demake for Persona 4, yeah, you can't do any of that. Although, you can play up to the dream sequence at the beginning of the game, so that's something, right? Most of the explorable areas are tied to the story of P4. You can explore parts of the town and talk to some NPCs before heading home. The story and demo ends after the dream sequence, where we only get a glimpse of what combat would be like if the game continued. Luckily, the demake for Persona 5 has us covered. Most of the combat mechanics from the original Persona 5 are included in this one battle, albeit simplified down. You have your classic actions such as attack, items, and gun, which is actually really effective in this fight. You can even do an all-out attack or negotiate with a shadow for a mask, but as the game puts it, this part is just filler. And while I'm pretty sure you can't lose this fight, you even have your trusty pocket curry to heal with. Unfortunately, the story leading up to this first fight is also pretty limited. You start your day in Cafe LeBlanc cleaning your room, before heading to bed and going to Dream Prison. You then go to school and get chewed out by the principal before heading back home and starting the next day. This is where the story leads into that first fight before the demo ends after it. While there isn't much to these two demakes, it's still incredibly interesting seeing them boil down to their core components. I really wonder how these games would play if full versions were made for the original Game Boy, although I highly doubt that they will. Big shoutouts to Sean SS and Johnny Beeman for creating these demakes, and if by a miracle they decide to release full games, then why not? I'll play through them. I was also going to cover the Persona 3 fan game as well, but it seemed to be more of a parody than a demake. But hey, if that's something you're interested in, then leave a comment and I'll make a video about it. And with all that being said, peace.